This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're coming on the air to bring you live coverage of the White House. President Trump is beginning remarks on immigration, a statement on immigration. Of course, all this in the context of the midterm elections now 5 days away. Let's listen to the president.
Schools, hospitals, and communities in general, taking precious resources away from the poorest Americans who need them most. Illegal immigration costs our country billions and billions of dollars each year. America is a welcoming country, and under my leadership, it's a welcoming country. We lead the world in humanitarian protection and assistance by far. It's nobody even close. We have the largest and most expansive immigration programs anywhere on the planet. We've issued 40 million green cards since 1970, which means the permanent residency and a path to citizenship for many, many people. But we will not allow our generosity to be abused by those who would break our laws, defy our rules, violate our borders, break into our country illegally. We won't allow it. Mass, uncontrolled immigration is especially unfair to the many wonderful, law-abiding immigrants already living here who followed the rules and waited their turn. Some have been waiting for many years. Some have been waiting for a long time. They've done everything perfectly. And they're going to come in. At some point, they're going to come in. Many cases, very soon. We need them to come in because we have companies coming into our country. They need workers. But they have to come in on a merit basis, and they will come in on a merit basis. The communities are often left to bear the cost and the influx of people that come in illegally. We can't allow that. There's a limit to how many people a nation can responsibly absorb into their societies. Every day, above and beyond our existing lawful admission programs, roughly 1,500 to 2,000 people try crossing our borders illegally. We do a very good job considering the laws are so bad. They're not archaic, they're incompetent. It's not that they're old, they're just bad. And we can't get any Democrat votes to change them. It's only the Republicans that are in unison. They want to change them. They want to make strong borders, want to get rid of any crime because of the borders, of which there's a lot. And we've done a great job with the laws that we have. We're moving in tremendous numbers of people to get out the MS-13 gangs and other gangs that illegally come into our country. And we're getting them out by the thousands. But this is a perilous situation, and it threatens to become even more hazardous as our economy gets better and better. A lot of the cause of this problem is the fact that we right now have the hottest economy anywhere in the world. It's doing better than any economy in the world. Jobs, unemployment, you look at any number. Right now we have more workers than any time in the history of our country. We have more people working, which is a tremendous statement. More people working than at any time in the history of our country. And people want to come in, and in some cases they want to take advantage of that. And that's okay, and we want them to come in, but they have to come in through merit. They have to come in legally. At this very moment, large, well-organized caravans of migrants are marching toward our southern border. Some people call it an invasion. It's like an invasion. They have violently overrun the Mexican border. You saw that 2 days ago. These are tough people in many cases. A lot of young men, strong men, and a lot of men that maybe we don't want in our country. But again, we'll find that out through the legal process. But they've overrun the Mexican police, and they've overrun and hurt badly Mexican soldiers. So this isn't an innocent group of people. There's a large number of people that are tough. They've injured, they've attacked, and the Mexican police and military has actually suffered. And I appreciate what Mexico is trying to do. So let me begin by stating that these illegal caravans will not be allowed into the United States, and they should turn back now because they're wasting their time. They should apply to come into our country. We want them to come into our country very much. We need people to help us with all of these companies that are coming in. We've never had anything like this. We have car companies coming in. We have Foxconn, so involved with the manufacturing of Apple products, coming in Wisconsin. We have a lot of companies coming in, but they have to apply, and they have to be wonderful people that are going to love our country and work hard. And we've already dispatched for the border the United States military, and they will do the job. They're setting up right now, and they're preparing. We hope nothing happens, but if it does, we are totally prepared. Greatest military anywhere in the world, and it's going to be and is now in great shape, no longer depleted like it was when I took over as the President of the United States. The government of Mexico has generously offered asylum, jobs, education, and medical care for people within the caravan, but many members of the caravan have refused these offers, which demonstrate that these migrants are not legitimate asylum seekers. They're not looking for protection, because if they were, they'd be able to get it from Mexico. Mexico has agreed to take them in and encourage them to stay. But they don't want to stay. They want to come into the United States. So this is no longer safety, and asylum is about safety. Asylum is not a program for those living in poverty. There are billions of people in the world living at the poverty level. The United States cannot possibly absorb them all. Asylum is a very special protection intended only for those fleeing government persecution based on race, religion, and other protected status. These caravans and illegal migrants are drawn to our country by Democrat-backed laws and left-wing judicial rulings. We're getting rulings that are so ridiculous, so bad, they're writing the laws. Can't do that. Collectively known as an example, catch and release. It's a disgrace that we have to put up with it. These policies lead to the release of illegal aliens into our communities after they've been apprehended. But we're not releasing anymore. Big change as of a couple of days ago. We're going to no longer release. We're going to catch. We're not going to release. They're going to stay with us until the deportation hearing or the asylum hearing takes place. So we're not releasing them into the community. We have millions of people that over the years have been released into the community. They never show up for the trials. They never come back. They're never seen again. And those people, they know who they are. And we know a lot of where they are, who they are. And those people will be deported, directly deported. The biggest loophole drawing illegal aliens to our borders is the use of fraudulent or meritless asylum claims to gain entry into our great country. An alien simply crosses the border illegally, finds a Border Patrol agent, and using well-coached language by lawyers and others that stand there and trying to get fees or whatever they can get, they're given a phrase to read. They never heard of the phrase before. They don't believe in the phrase. But they're given a little legal statement to read. And they read it. And now all of a sudden they're supposed to qualify. But that's not the reason they're here. This merely asserts the need for asylum, and then often released into the United States, and they await a lengthy court process. The court process will take years sometimes for them to attend. Well, we're not releasing them into our country any longer. They'll wait for long periods of time. We're putting up massive cities of tents. The military is helping us incredibly well. I want to thank the Army Corps of Engineers. They've been so efficient, so good, so talented. We have thousands of tents. We have a lot of tents. We have a lot of everything. We're going to hold them right there. We're not letting them into our country, and then they never show up. Almost. It's like a level of 3%. They never show up for the trial. So by the time their trial comes, they're gone. Nobody knows where they are. But we know where a lot of them are, and they're going to be deported. There are now nearly 700,000 aliens inside the United States awaiting adjudication of their claims. Most of these people, we have no idea how they got there, why they got there, and the number is actually going to be a much larger number as we look at all of the data. So if you look at just at a minimal number, it's the size of Vermont or bigger. And the overall number could be 10 million people, could be 12 million people, could be 20 million people. The record keeping from past administrations has not exactly been very good. As human smugglers and traffickers have learned how the game is played and how to game the system, we have witnessed a staggering 1,700 increase in asylum claims since the year 2010. They understand the law better than the lawyers understand the law. You have a lot of professionalism there. You have a lot of professionalism involved with setting up the caravans. You take a look at the way that's happening. Even the countries, you look at Honduras and El Salvador, and you look at what's happening at the different levels in different countries or what's happening on the streets. There's a lot of professionalism taking place, and there seems to be a lot of money passing. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, these big caravans are formed, and they start marching up. They've got a long way to go. On average, once released, an asylum case takes 3.5 years to complete. Think of it. Somebody walks into our country, reads a statement given by a lawyer, and we have a 3.5-year court case for one person, whereas other people tell them, out, get out, just get out. Other countries, get out. We have a border, get out. We go through years and years of litigation because of the Democrats and the incompetent, very, very stupid laws that we have. They're the laughing stock all over the world, including the people that are marching up. They understand. But the difference is we're not allowing them in, and we're not releasing, and we're not doing any of the things that were done for so many years that really are terrible for our country. The overwhelming majority of claims are rejected by the courts, but by that time, the alien has usually long since disappeared into our country. So they never get to see the judge, they never get to have a ruling. They don't care because they're in the country and nobody knows where they are. All told, there are approximately 1 million aliens who have received final orders.
We're watching President Trump in the Roosevelt room, and what we were told was going to be a statement of remarks regarding immigration. And in fact, he is essentially repeating many of the refrains we've heard on the campaign trail, especially of late, as immigration becomes the president and Republicans' closing argument as we head toward the midterm elections. The president using fiery language, calling the situation perilous, likening those caravans to an invasion, saying it was not an innocent group of people, noting that there were men in these groups, men we don't want, no mention of women or children who were also a part of those caravans. I want to bring in NBC's Kelly O'Donnell at the White House with more of this. Kelly, no real policy statement there other than the asylum seekers will not be let into the country where their cases are being processed.
What we are told is that he is making changes into how asylum is processed and to try to limit the number of people coming into the country. We have not heard an individual presidential level change to the existing law, but the president so far talking about using U.S. military to set up a tent city, if you will, to house those who are detained and not let them into the United States, but to it's a term of art in immigration, catch and release. This would be now catch and detain, holding those that come into the country to be processed for a period of time through whatever the legal steps might be, instead of allowing them to come into the country and then return at a later court date. The president wanting to make a big pitch on immigration with just a couple of days before the midterm elections, an issue he believes galvanizes his voters. Very strong language from the president on the nature of the people in the caravan and their intentions, and also strong terms about how he wants to see the U.S. Change its way of welcoming migrants into the country, or in some cases, not welcoming them.
All right, Kelly, let me bring in Chuck Todd, our moderator of Meet the Press. Chuck, this on the heels of that incendiary commercial that is heightening the fear factor over immigration. Does it all fit together?
Sure, it all fits together. Look, there's nothing about this statement is precedented for what for what it's worth. There's just really no precedent for it. The president blatantly using the backdrop of the White House for what is, frankly, incendiary political rhetoric to some. And it's sort of jarring to see him try to do this from the White House, which is clearly about the midterm elections and trying to paint a picture, paint a crisis that, frankly, our cameras have not seen. We've not captured. Our own reporting has never been able to confirm any of the accusations or the picture, for any part of the picture that he's painting about these folks that are walking hundreds of miles to try to get here. So obviously it's election driven. I think I am surprised that he was willing to do this at the White House. This is something that would have been more appropriate. I don't think any other president would have given a statement like this on the White House grounds. They would have actually done it in an actual political setting. And that's just look, he breaks all these norms all the time. So at this point, none of that's a shock. But I think, Lester, it's worth pointing out how just no other president would have done that blatant of a political statement like that this close to an election using the White House as a backdrop. It was quite striking.
And we should know we weren't given a lot of guidance. We weren't given, in fact, any guidance about what this would be.
Look, he's the president of the United States, Lester, and they put out this, and I think we are obligated to cover the president. But I think we're obligated to put it in context, as all of us have been doing.
Well, let's turn to Gabe Gutierrez right now. He's reporting from the U.S.-Mexico border in Hidalgo, Texas. Gabe, the president, as I said, made characterizations of this as an invasion force, not a group of innocent people. What do we know about these caravans, what the estimated numbers are, and how many might ultimately arrive at the border?
Well, Hi there, Lester. Well, several points to make about that. We have been with the largest migrant caravan that started in Honduras, but we ran into them in Guatemala and also in southern Mexico. There's a wide range of numbers estimating their size. The latest number has them potentially 3,500 in one caravan and 3,000 in another, so between 6,000 and 7,000 Central Americans making their way through Mexico. The president said that they had attacked Mexican police. What we were able to witness was a brief clash among the Guatemala-Mexican border, but for the most part, what we saw were women and children saying that they were fleeing violence and poverty in Central America. Now, Lester, here at the border, another point we should make, still a lot of questions about the details of this deployment. Local officials say they're still waiting on orders on where these troops will be deployed. Right now, more than 1,000 troops are being trained near San Antonio and awaiting orders of where exactly they will head. The question right now is also, when will these Central American migrants make their way to the U.S. border? There's conflicting reports about where they will head. The largest group is still nearly 1,000 miles away, so it could be at least several weeks before any of these caravans reach the U.S. border, Lester.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez along the border for us. Gabe, thanks very much. We'll continue to monitor the president's remarks. Obviously, this remains an important story. We'll have full coverage on NBC Nightly News. Until then, I'm Lester Holt. We'll see you later.